Alright, so we talked about loops, we learned about the for, while, and do while loops. And today we are going to continue learning about loops and how to use them for different other objectives or purposes. The first thing that we are going to talk about is running totals and sentinel values. And running totals is an idea to motivate. The idea is, let's think about this question. How would you write a program that calculates the average of the grades of a classroom? So you have a classroom, there is a number of students there, and they took a test, and you would like to calculate the average of this test. So if you think about it, this is a very simple problem. What you do first is that you add. So you add all grades of the students, right? And then you divide by number of students. So this is straightforward. So if we want to do this, let's think about it. So adding the numbers, this is the first step. So here, this is the first thing that we want to do. Let's think about it as if you have a container here that is empty, and then you start to throw in the grades, right? So grade 1, grade 2, 3, and 4, right? So you keep adding the grades, and this is going to add grade 1 plus grade 2 plus grade 3 plus and so on. So that's adding the grades. And then you divide by the number of students, which is that total here. So you have a total, right? And then you divide total divided by, let's say, n, number of students. And here this is going to be your average. So that's it. So that's the solution for this problem. Now the question is, how would you do that? How would you add all the grades to total? Right? Notice here that the user is going to enter one grade at a time. Right? And what you want to do is to add these one by one to that total. So if you think about it, one way to do it is that to say total is equal to 0 initially. That's an empty container. All right? That process here, this one here, is called the accumulator. This is where you are accumulating the grades. And then what you do next is that you say total is equal to total plus grade 1. Correct? So this is adding grade 1 to total, which was initially 0. Then 0 plus grade 1, whatever that is, add it together, and then go and update it. Then what happens next? Total becomes total plus G2. So notice here that this new total here is that one, right? Which comes from the old total, which was 0, plus G1 goes to total. Total here plus G2 goes to total. And then this one here plus G3, right? And that is stored in total, and so on. Alright, so that is the process of what we call running total. You are running total by summing the numbers that accumulates with each iteration of a loop. So every time from the user, you enter a new grade, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and you keep adding this and running that total. That process is adding to the total here variable, which is referred to as an accumulator, which is going to add all of these grades together. So to practice this process, we have two examples: grades average, which is an example that we are going to write together, and total scales, which is from the book, but I provide you the code in case you want to see it and use it. So let's go to BlueGen and let's write this code. Let's write this code together. We are going to prompt the user for number of students, and then we are going to add these grades and calculate the average. So the first thing, to prompt the user for the values, I'm going to import java.util.scanner. And then the first thing is to prompt the user for the number of students. So here I'm going to system.out.println, and I'm going to write prompt here. I'm going to print instead of println, and then we say how many students in class. Right, in this case. And then here I'm going to store this int, let's say students is equal to, and here before we do this, actually we need to define our scanner. So here, I'm going to scanner kb is equal to new scanner and link it to system.n, and then use kb to read the next int from the user for the number of students. Now I know the number of students. It's stored here in this variable students, and then the next step is to run a loop that is going to prompt the user for students' number of points or grades and then add them together. So here I'm going to start by doing this using the for loop, and the for loop is the best option for that because we know how many times we want to do this for the students' number of times. So in this case here I'm going to say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than students, I plus plus, we have date, and then I'm going to say system.out.println, enter the grade of a student, and we actually do it. So enter grade of a student, and then what I'm going to do is to store this in, let's say a grade, let's say int student grade is equal to kb dot next. And actually the grade could be, doesn't have to be an integer, so we could just go back and make this double, and then we can say next, right? And then you will need a sentence, like you will need the accumulator, right? So we didn't define this, so let's define that to be a double here, a double, and we are going to say total grades, for example, or total grade, right? And then here we could say total grade plus equal student grade, right? Which is equivalent to saying total grade is equal to total grade plus student grade. Alright, so this is exactly the same. So that is total grade, which we need to initialize to be 0. Alright, so here this is that. And then now by the end of this loop, notice here that every time you go here for I is equal to 0 up to students, whatever that number is, after you prompt the user here, you're going to prompt the user, take the input, put it in student grade, and then go and add that to the accumulator, right? Once you're done, you have both the total grade and you have the number of students. Then you could just simply say double average or class average is equal to total grade divided by students. Right, and then system the average of the classes, and then here plus class average, and then let's divide that. So that's this. Let's run it. Here, how many students in the class? Let's say 3, 60, 7, 80, so the average set, alright, for the 3 students. And you could enter whatever number you want, so let's say 2, 85, and so on. So that's how you would do it. Just because we are practicing, so let's go back and try to repeat this process using a while loop. So how to convert this for loop into a while loop. Again, even though the for loop makes more sense to use here because we know how many times we're going to run this code. So using while loop, what you would do is that you would need to split that and try to build the structure of the while loop. So that initialization would be happening outside the loop into I is equal to 0. Then you have the while, and your condition is that I is less than students. As long as I is less than students, keep going. And then the body of the loop would be the same exactly here, except that the update needs to be done here explicitly in a separate line in the while loop. Alright, so if I comment this one here, and then compile, run, and let's say we have 4 students, and the average is 65, somewhere in between. Alright, so that is how you you do this running total using for loop or while loop, and how to move from for loop to while loop, and so on. So that's this, and let's go back and continue talking about the rest of this lecture. So the next part that we would like to talk about is the sentinel value. And to motivate the sentinel value concept, let me ask you this. What if you don't know how many students are there? What if you have a stack of papers, you would like to keep entering these grades as long as this stack of paper is there? And you keep entering until you are done, and then you want to tell the program, I'm done, calculate the average score. Right? So to do this process, you would need to give a signal. You would need to give a signal to the program that tells it, I am done, I have no more papers, I have no more grades to enter, calculate the average for me, please. So that process is called the sentinel value. And that signal that you are going to give to the program is called the sentinel value. The sentinel value from that sense comes as a value that the program should not expect. Alright? So let's say I'm getting a grade for an exam, and these grades are going to be between 0 and 100, right? Hopefully nobody's getting any negative grades in this. So in this case, any negative value would be a valid sentinel value, right? So in this case, I would go and say, enter -1 once you are done. So if I enter -1, I look at it and say, oh, that's not a valid grade. In that case, I'm going to terminate. Now, that wouldn't work if you are calculating the average of, let's say, temperatures, right? So if you are calculating the average of temperatures, negative value is a valid value. However, a negative value like -999 wouldn't be a valid, or a positive 999, right? So in this case, you could use either of these grades as the sentinel value to send the signal to the program that you are done entering values. Again, we have two examples. One of them is the soccer points that is given by the book, and the other one is the grades average sentinel, which is a modification of the code that we just did, and we are going to change it to become using sentinel value. So here, I'm going to copy this, go to grade average sentinel, post it here, and we have our scanner imported, and that's it. So let's delete that for loop here, and let's focus on that code that we have. Now, I don't want to prompt the user for how many students. Alright. Instead, I would like to print something like this and say -1 to exit. Alright, so that's what I want to do, -1 to exit. Now, that change that we just did here requires a couple of other changes. Alright. So for example here, if I enter -1, that should exit, right? So here I'm going to say, as long as a student grade is not equal to -1, keep prompting the user for more grades, right? If it's -1, then exit. Alright, so that is one way to do it. Now, the other thing that you need to think about is, how are you adding these points? So let's think about it here. Now, I have my total grades, that's the accumulator, we need it. I have a loop control counter here, which is going to count how many students did I enter. Now, student grade is not known before, right? So I could go here and prompt the user for student grade, and actually initialize this, declare the student grade here in the mover tree. So total grade is 0. Prompt the user for the value. If student grade, here is double, and you store it here. And then initialize a counter. Now, while the student grade is not equal to -1, go prompt the user, take values, and add it to the total grade. Right? Once you're done, you would like to calculate the average, which is going to be the total grade divided by the total number of students that you entered, right, the grades for, and that would be stored in I, because every time you go through this loop, you are incrementing I. So here I would be sufficient. Alright, so let's see, is that going to work? Let's check. What if I enter -1 as the first value? Here we go. So not a number. That would be because I'm dividing by 0. I didn't count any students. Right? So I'm trying to divide by 0 in this case. Alright, and that is going to be nothing. Now, if I compile again, let's say enter first value, it's 50. Right? That's a valid input, it's not -1, so keep going. 60, 70, 80, and then -1. Alright, now notice here that the grade is not correct. Right? Why is that? So the answer to this question is because once you entered here 80, right, what you did is that you go inside from the user, they entered -1, and then what happened is that you are adding this to the total grade. So you are adding the -1 to the total grade, which is not correct. So what do you want to do to fix this problem? What you need to do is to calculate, right? So you need to calculate first before you add. Alright? So here's how it works. I ask you for an input. If you say -1, I'm not going to enter this while loop and I'm done. Right? If you enter a valid value, I go inside and add it to the student grade, and then I go and prompt you again. If it's -1, I will not continue. If it's a valid input, I will go inside and then I will add it and keep doing this. So let's see if this is going to fix the problem. There we go, 65. So now it fixed that problem. So you see here, the order of operation would really change how the code is going to run. Because whether you're adding before you take the -1 or before after, that matters. Now the other thing is that how could we fix this problem that if I enter -1, I don't want to continue, and then this is not a number. So here I could do something like this. If I is not equal to 0, do the double calculation, right? Else you could so here, let's say I'm going to layer this here. Oops. Class average is going to be 0 initially, and then I'm going to say that class average is equal to total grade, otherwise class average is equal to 0. Alright, this is done before I print the class average. And for good programming practice, I would add the curly braces, even though it's a single line. That's perfectly fine. Compile, run, and then if I enter -1, then the average is 0, and it's not printing that, not a number anymore. So that's this. This is how we use the loops to run total, to maintain a running total, and also how to use sending value to stop an operation, to send a signal to the code that we are done, stop. Before we go, this is something that is not in this chapter, but I would like you to think about it. How would you perform something similar to running total or maintaining a running total, but with multiplication this time? So that's something I would like you to pause the video and think about. How would you do it with multiplication? So one thing you need to think about is, before we had the accumulator, which is a container that was initialized to 0, and this is where we would throw in all of these grades, right? And we are adding. Now, you want to do it with multiplication. How would you do it? Right? And I would like you to think about, what is this operation equivalent to? right? So pause the video, think about it, and then continue to understand the answer. Now the answer is, let's say I'm running the multiplication here, the running product as I'm entering 5, multiplying this by 4, multiplying this by 3, 2, 1, 0. Can you multiply by 0 in this case? You can't. This is going to make the whole thing 0. And that's the major difference between running total and running product. You cannot start from 0, you need to start from 1 because you're multiplying. So the initial value in your container should be set to. Then you start multiplying. Now if you're multiplying things like 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5, what is that equivalent to? That's my question. Of course you could be multiplying 30 times 50 times anything that you want. But if you're running it in that sense, what is that equivalent to? Alright. So if you think about it, this is basically 5 factorial. 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, that is 5 factorial. So if you want to write a program that is calculating factorial, this is how you do it. And I included a code that is going to show you this process. So here, running product, that would be a container that was set to 1, because you cannot set it to 0 like in the accumulator of the total grades. And then what you could do is that you go from I is equal to 1 to 5 and start to multiply and store in this container, and then print using the container.